Zane North didn't belong in the VIP lounge, and he knew it the second the receptionist gave him a double take. "Sir, this area is for premium passengers." "I know," he cut in quickly, adjusting the worn strap of his duffel on his shoulder. "But my daughter's sick. We missed our flight. I just needed somewhere quiet for a few minutes." He nodded toward the little girl curled up beside him in the stroller, cheeks flushed, thumb tucked into her mouth as she dozed off. The receptionist hesitated, glanced at the child, then gave a small sigh. 10 minutes. "Thank you," he said, meaning it. 10 minutes of silence felt like luxury when you hadn't slept properly in 2 days. He wheeled the stroller to the farthest corner, away from the glass walls and suited travelers sipping champagne. He crouched beside Everly, brushing a curl off her forehead. "You're okay, baby girl, just rest." He didn't notice the woman until she dropped her phone. It clattered across the marble floor, and he instinctively scooped it up before it hit the wall. "Got it," he said, handing it back. She looked up startled, her sunglasses still on. "Thanks," she said, her voice smooth but tired. "No problem." He was already turning back toward Everly when he saw her wince as she sat back down. Her ankle looked twisted, heels abandoned beside her chair. "You okay?" She hesitated. I landed weird getting out of the car. Probably shouldn't have tried to walk in 5-inch heels. He chuckled, "You don't say." She cracked a smile. "I deserve that." Without thinking, he crouched again. "Mind if I look? Might just be a strain." She looked at him closely for the first time. Stubble, dark circles, hoodie definitely not first class, but his hands were gentle as he lightly touched her ankle. "You're not a doctor." "No, but I worked construction for 12 years. I've seen worse." She winced again, then bit her lip to keep from reacting. "I'm flying in 2 hours." "Not unless you want to limp off the plane." He grabbed 2 napkins from the bar, folded them into a makeshift wrap, and secured it with her silk scarf. "Temporary fix. You'll need ice." She blinked in surprise. "You didn't have to do that." He gave her a half smile. "You looked like you needed help." She hesitated. "I'm Wren Prescott." "Zane North," he nodded toward Everly. "And that's my daughter, Everly." Wren looked over, her expression softening. "She's beautiful." "She's the best thing I've ever done," he said, voice low. "Even if she's got a fever and I've got no money left to get us a hotel." Wren blinked. "Wait, are you stranded here?" "I had a job lined up in Denver. Got canceled last minute. I was using the last of my savings to get us to my sister's in Chicago. Flight got delayed, she got sick, and now I'm just trying to keep her comfortable until the next standby opens up." Wren was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a platinum lounge card. "Use this. It'll get you food, drinks, a place for her to lie down. You look like you haven't eaten in a day." He stared at her. "Can't take that." "It's a guest pass," she smiled, "and I'm not using it." Zane hesitated, pride warring with desperation. Then Everly shifted in her sleep and whimpered. He took the card. "Thank you." They didn't talk much after that. Wren made a couple of calls from her phone, speaking quietly in French and something that sounded like Mandarin. Zane fed Everly soup from the lounge and let her nap on a plush couch while he sat on the floor beside her, exhausted. An hour later, Wren hobbled over. "Your daughter's fever's down," she said, watching Everly sleep. "Yeah, must have been the warm food." She sat beside him with a soft sigh. "You're a good dad." Zane didn't answer right away. "I'm trying. She deserves better than this." Wren looked at him, really looked. "How old are you?" 35. "Why aren't you working?" Ran my own crew. Framing, drywall, roofing. But last year had to pull Everly out of daycare when my ex left. No childcare, no work." She was silent, then, "That's brutal." "Yeah, but she's worth it." Wren pulled something from her bag and held it out. "Here." He glanced at the black leather wallet in confusion. "It's a business card," she said. "If you get stuck again, call that number. They're hiring for site managers in Chicago." He took it, studying the gold-embossed logo. Prescott Global. Wren gave a small smile. "Yeah, family company." Zane raised an eyebrow. "You work there?" "Something like that." He looked at her, curiosity flaring. "What do you do?" She hesitated. "I run it." He blinked. "You're the Wren Prescott." "Guilty." He laughed, disbelieving. "And here I was thinking you were a stranded socialite with a twisted ankle." "I twisted my ankle," she said, grinning, "but I'm not stranded." He shook his head. "You're a billionaire." "Technically." Zane looked at her differently now, but not because of the money. She hadn't acted like someone untouchable. She'd sat beside him on the floor, shared her scarf, and offered help without fanfare. "I don't get it," he said. "Why help me?" Wren looked away for a second, then back at him. "Because no one would have helped me when I was a kid. I know what it's like to be invisible." Zane swallowed hard. She stood slowly, testing her ankle. "I have to catch my flight, but I'm back next week. If you're in Chicago, maybe we could grab coffee." Zane nodded slowly. "Yeah, like that." She smiled again. "Good, and hey, don't lose that card." When she walked away, limping slightly, Zane looked down at the business card again. Prescott Global. He glanced at Everly, who was breathing easier now, curled up with her stuffed bear. Maybe things were finally turning around. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through Zane's jacket as he stepped out of the job site trailer, tugging his hard hat off and wiping sweat from his brow. The site manager from Prescott Global had met him 3 days after his call, just like Wren promised. He hadn't expected much. Maybe an interview, maybe a brush off. Instead, they'd handed him blueprints, a clipboard, and a crew of 8. Now, 3 weeks later, he was running one of the company's smaller commercial renovations. It was nothing fancy, an old brick building in West Loop being gutted and repurposed, but it paid better than anything he'd seen in years, and it came with something he hadn't felt in a long time: stability. Zane glanced at his watch. Everly's preschool let out in 20 minutes, and his sister was working late. He jogged to his truck, the one he'd almost sold a month ago, and slid behind the wheel. He'd installed a new car seat just last weekend. Little things like that shouldn't have made him proud, but they did. When he pulled up in front of the school, Everly was already waiting on the steps, her tiny backpack hanging crookedly off one shoulder. A teacher stood beside her, waving as she spotted him. "Daddy," Everly ran the moment the door opened. He caught her mid-leap, lifting her easily. "Hey, sunshine, did you finish your painting today?" She nodded vigorously. "It's a horse, but it looks like a dog." "That's my girl," he said, chuckling. "Come on, let's go get some dinner." On the way to the diner, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. He didn't answer unknowns. Too many debt collectors still thought he lived in Denver. The second buzz came just as he parked. This time he checked it. "Zane North?" the voice on the other end asked. "This is Lana. I'm Wren Prescott's assistant. She asked me to reach out." Zane's grip tightened on the phone. "Is something wrong?" "No, not at all. She's hosting a gallery event this weekend at the Prescott Foundation. She'd like you to attend, you and Everly, if you're available." He paused. "It's not really my scene." "She said to tell you there's a chocolate fountain." Everly's ears perked up. "Chocolate?" He sighed. "Text me the address." That Saturday, Zane stared at his reflection in the mirror, tugging at the collar of the shirt he hadn't worn since his cousin's wedding. The sleeves were too short, and the buttons strained slightly at the chest. He looked like a man trying to pass for someone else. "You look fancy," Everly said, standing on tiptoe to examine herself in the mirror. She wore a soft blue dress his sister had picked up from a thrift store and had fixed the hem on herself. "You look better," he said, lifting her into his arms. "Let's go see what billionaires eat." The gallery looked more like a palace than a building. White stone walls with tall arched windows, gold fixtures, and a chandelier so large it could have lit a football field. Inside, the guests moved like they'd rehearsed it, gliding from painting to painting, champagne glasses in hand, every wrist and neckline glittering. Zane did his best not to look like he'd rather be anywhere else. Then he saw her. Wren stood across the room, her hair swept up in a way that made her cheekbones look sharper than he remembered. She wore a deep navy gown with a structured neckline and no jewelry. She didn't need any. She was radiant without trying, talking to a small group of guests with polite detachment. She saw him. Her whole face changed. "Zane," she said as she approached, heels clicking softly on the marble floor. "You came." "I wasn't going to," he admitted, but then someone mentioned chocolate. Wren looked down at Everly, who clung shyly to his hand. "Hi there." Everly peered up at her. "You're the airplane lady." Wren crouched without hesitation. "That's me, and you must be the one who likes soup and naps." Zane watched his daughter crack a small, delighted smile. "I saved you both a table," Wren said, standing. "Come on, it's quieter in the garden room." The garden room was a glass-enclosed atrium strung with fairy lights, overlooking a courtyard filled with white roses. A table for 3 waited near the fountain, already set with plates of finger food and a bowl of strawberries beside a gleaming chocolate fountain. Everly gasped, "Oh wow." Zane leaned over. "Take it slow. That thing looks like it costs more than our truck." Wren poured them each a glass of sparkling cider and sat near him, crossing her legs carefully. "I'm glad you came." "Still not sure why I'm here," he said. "Because I wanted to see you." Her voice softened. "And because I've been thinking about you since the airport." Zane looked at her. "You could have called." "I wanted to," she said, "but I didn't want to make you feel like I was pushing something." "Like what?" She hesitated, like I was offering more than a job. He didn't answer at first, watching Everly dip a strawberry and giggle. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," Wren said. "You didn't care who I was, you weren't trying to impress me." "I didn't know who you were." "That's exactly what I mean." He leaned back, folding his arms. "And now that you've seen me in a button-down and not covered in drywall dust, what do you think?" "I think you look uncomfortable," she said, smiling. He laughed. "You're not wrong." Wren shifted slightly, her tone quieting. "This isn't my world either, not really. My parents built this foundation. I show up because I'm expected to. And the rest of the time, I'm in boardrooms trying to keep a company from growing teeth." Zane tilted his head. "You don't like it." "I like building things, creating something that lasts, but I'm not interested in being the face of a legacy." "Too late for that," he said. She met his eyes. "Maybe, but I still get to choose who I bring into it." Zane studied her. She wasn't flirting. She was laying something bare, and it wasn't about wealth or status. It was about trust. Before he could respond, Everly tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, can I give her my picture?" He blinked. "What picture?" She fished a folded piece of paper from her backpack and handed it to Wren. "I made it in school. It's you're holding soup." Wren unfolded the crayon drawing and stared at it. Her eyes went glassy. "I love it." Everly beamed. Zane cleared his throat. "She doesn't usually give those away." "I'll frame it," Wren said, "and hang it in my office." Later, as the event wound down and Everly nodded off in his arms, Wren walked them to the valet. "I'm glad you came," she said again, her voice quiet. "I'm glad you invited us." She looked at him, something uncertain in her expression. "Are you free next Friday?" His brow lifted. "Why?" "Because I make terrible pancakes," she said, "and I thought maybe you and Everly could show me how it's done." Zane glanced down at his daughter, then back at her. "That sounds like a good plan." Wren smiled. "I'll text you." As the valet pulled up with Zane's truck, she reached out and touched his arm. "You're not just someone I helped at an airport." He stepped closer. "I know." She leaned up, brushing a kiss against his cheek, her lips warm against skin still chilled from the night air. "Good night, Zane." He watched her walk back toward the building, the glow from the atrium casting her in soft gold. This wasn't a life he'd planned for. But maybe it was one he could grow into. Wren stood in the middle of her loft kitchen, staring down at a bowl of batter that looked more like wet cement than anything edible. She held a whisk in one hand, her phone now streaked with flour in the other, and muttered under her breath. "You said 1 cup of flour, not a mountain." Zane leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his dark Henley sleeves rolled past the elbows. "Told you pancakes aren't about precision. It's about instinct." "I built a multinational logistics empire on precision," Wren said, gesturing toward the bowl like it had personally insulted her. "This is chaos." Everly popped up behind the kitchen island, standing on a little stool Wren's assistant had delivered earlier that morning. "You forgot the eggs." Wren blinked. I didn't." "There's no eggs in there," Everly said confidently, pointing. "Daddy says pancakes without eggs are just sad bread." Zane grinned. "She's not wrong." Wren sighed and dropped the whisk. "Fine, I surrender, you take over." He stepped forward, brushing her fingers as he took the bowl. She didn't pull away. "Go find the syrup," he said. "You can redeem yourself with toppings." Wren turned toward the pantry, her voice light. "That I can do." As she walked away, Zane glanced over at Everly, who was now carefully placing blueberries in a neat row across the counter. "Hey," he said quietly, "you like it here?" She nodded. "It smells like vanilla, and the couch is really soft." He nodded once, stirring the batter. "Good." By the time the pancakes hit the griddle, the air was thick with warmth and butter. Wren returned with a lineup of toppings that would put a 5-star brunch to shame. Sliced strawberries, whipped cream, chocolate chips in a crystal bowl, and something that looked suspiciously like edible gold flakes. Zane raised an eyebrow. "What is that?" "Garnish," she said, setting it down like it was obvious. Everly leaned over the counter. "Can I try the shiny stuff?" "Only if your dad says it's okay." Zane flipped a pancake with one hand, the motion effortless. "Knock yourself out." When they finally sat down at the small dining table positioned beside floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline stretched out behind them like a painting. Wren had moved her laptop and work files to the side, and for once, she wasn't checking her watch. "So," she said, cutting into her stack, "this is the infamous Saturday pancake ritual." Zane nodded. "Started when Everly was 2. It was the only thing she'd eat without throwing a fit." "She still throws fits," Everly said around a mouthful of whipped cream. "You get that from your mother," Zane replied. Wren paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "You never talk about her." Zane didn't look up. "That's because there's nothing worth saying." "Fair." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Wren set her fork down and leaned back. "I didn't invite you here just for pancakes." Zane looked up. "I was offered a seat on the Forbes board this week," she said. "It's a big deal. Visibility, influence, all of it." What's the catch? He asked. They want me to present as more grounded, she said slowly. Relatable. I need to humanize my image. Zane's eyes narrowed. You're not asking me to pretend to be your boyfriend, are you? No, she said quickly, then hesitated. Well, not exactly. Wren. I'm not asking you to lie, she said. But they're hosting a benefit next weekend. I'm expected to attend with someone. And you make me look like I'm not just a cold executive in a designer suit. You make me look real. He leaned back in his chair. So you want me to play the role of the charming working-class man who softens the ice queen. I want you to come as yourself, she said, but I won't pretend it's not strategic. Zane didn't respond right away. He glanced at Everly, who was now trying to stack blueberries like building blocks. I don't like being used, he said quietly. I'm not using you, she said, her voice just as soft. I'm telling you exactly what this is. I want you there. I want Everly there too, and yes, it helps me professionally, but that's not the only reason I asked. He met her gaze. Then what's the other reason? She didn't flinch. Because I like who I'm around you. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Everly ruined the tension by knocking over her blueberry tower and letting out a dramatic groan. This is a disaster. Zane laughed, the sound low and genuine, and stood up. We'll come, but I'm not wearing a tie. Wren grinned, fair enough. The following Saturday arrived in a blur of last-minute fittings and hair gel that Everly hated. Wren had arranged for a stylist to help them get ready at her place, not that Zane was thrilled about it, but he couldn't argue with the results. His blazer actually fit, and Everly's dress had pockets, which she declared made it the greatest dress of all time. They arrived at the Prescott Foundation's rooftop gala just as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting everything in molten gold. Strings of delicate lights crisscrossed above the crowd, and a jazz quartet played near the bar. Zane kept a hand on Everly's shoulder as they walked in, feeling like he'd stepped into a dream. Wren appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a sleek black gown that shimmered slightly when she moved. Her hair was pinned back, revealing a pair of earrings that probably cost more than his truck. But her eyes lit up the second she saw them, and she descended the stairs without hesitation. You clean up well, she said. You say that like you're surprised. She looked at Everly. You look like a princess. I have pockets, Everly said proudly. Wren leaned in, conspiratorial. That's the mark of true royalty. Zane walked beside her as they made their way through the crowd. Waiters passed by with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres he couldn't pronounce. People glanced in their direction, some curious, some whispering. You sure you want me here? He murmured. I'm exactly sure, she said. Let them wonder. They reached the center of the terrace, where a small stage had been set up. Wren was scheduled to give a speech later, but for now, she mingled. Zane watched her move through the crowd, confident, poised, but never distant. She introduced him by name, never once explaining who he was in relation to her, just Zane. At one point, a man in a tailored navy suit approached them, his expression guarded. Wren, he said, didn't expect to see you with company. Wren's smile didn't waver. Daniel, this is Zane North. Zane, this is Daniel Grant. He's one of the Foundation's oldest board members. Daniel's eyes flicked to Zane's calloused hands, then to Everly, who clung to her father's leg. I see, he said. Zane didn't bother offering his hand. Wren's tone cooled. Daniel was just leaving. Daniel hesitated, then gave a shallow nod and disappeared into the crowd. Zane exhaled. Friend of yours. Ex-fiancé, she said, if you can believe that. He arched a brow. No offense, but your taste has gotten a lot better. She laughed, and the sound cut through the tension like sunlight. Later, as the night deepened and the city sparkled around them, Wren took the stage. Zane stood off to the side with Everly, who was now half asleep in his arms. Wren cleared her throat, her voice steady. "Tonight's about connection," she said, "about remembering that behind every number on a spreadsheet is a human life. I didn't always understand that, but something happened recently that reminded me. Someone reminded me that success means nothing if you can't share it." She looked directly at Zane. "And sometimes, the people who change your life the most are the ones you least expect." Zane felt something shift in his chest. Not nerves, not pride. Hope. Real, solid, terrifying hope. And for the first time in years, he didn't try to talk himself out of it. Wren pressed her back against the elevator wall, the soft hum of it rising toward the penthouse floor doing nothing to steady her pulse. She had given dozens of speeches before boardrooms, press conferences, even televised announcements, but none had carried the same weight as seeing Zane watching her from the crowd, Everly tucked into his arms, as if they belonged there. As if they belonged to her. When the doors opened, she stepped into the quiet of her apartment. The city glittered through the wall of windows, but the lights felt colder tonight, distant. She slipped off her heels and padded to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water she barely drank. She hadn't expected this. Not the way Zane had looked at her after her speech. Not the ache in her chest when he left without saying much of anything. It wasn't disappointment, it was something more dangerous. Hope, maybe, or worse, longing. Her intercom buzzed. She blinked, setting the glass down. It was past midnight. She pressed the button. Yes. "It's me." She didn't hesitate. "Come up." When Zane stepped into the apartment, he looked different. Not in the physical sense, he still wore the same clothes from the gala, but his expression had shifted. He looked like a man who had made a decision and was ready to live with it. "Everly's with your sister?" she asked. "Asleep. I dropped her off 10 minutes ago." Wren nodded and folded her arms, suddenly uncertain. "You left kind of fast tonight." "I know." She waited. "I needed air and time to think," he said, stepping closer. "Because I've been through a lot of doors that looked like opportunity, and most of them locked behind me once I walked in." Her throat tightened. "That's not what this is." "I know that now," he said. "But tonight, hearing you talk about connection, about someone reminding you what matters made me realize I've been doing the same thing. Only I didn't say it out loud." She swallowed. "Say it now." Zane took another step toward her, closing the distance between them. "You walked into an airport lounge and gave a stranger soup, a job, and a reason to believe in something better. And not once did you ask for anything in return. You didn't care about what I could give you or what I used to be. You saw me now. That's rare." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I saw someone who deserved more." He reached out, brushing his fingers along the edge of her jaw with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "I was scared," he said. "Still am, but I don't want to keep walking away from something just because it feels good, because it feels like it might last." Wren leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "Then don't." His arms came around her instinctively, pulling her into him. She didn't hesitate. The kiss was slow and quiet, no fireworks. No dramatic music, just the press of two people who had lived through enough disappointment to know when something real was standing in front of them. When they pulled apart, she stayed close, her fingers still resting lightly against his chest. "I'm not good at this," she said softly. "I don't need perfect," he replied. "I just need you." She smiled, the kind that felt unfamiliar after years of calculated charm. "Then stay." He nodded, his voice low. "I want to." They spent the rest of the night on the couch, not touching, not needing to. They talked about everything they hadn't had time to say before: how she'd grown up under pressure, how he dropped out of college to raise his younger brother after their father died, how both of them had learned to survive before they ever learned to ask for more. When sunlight filtered through the windows, Wren was the first to rise. She padded into the kitchen and started coffee with a level of caution usually reserved for live grenades. Zane followed, his hair a mess and his voice still gravelly from sleep. "You're not going to ask if I want cream or sugar," he teased. "I'm not trying to ruin it," she said, pouring 2 mugs and handing him one. He took a sip, winced, and laughed. "Still better than your pancakes." She nudged his hip with hers. "Rude." He leaned against the counter, watching her. "You ever think about what comes next?" "I used to think 5 years ahead. Now I'm lucky if I can see 5 days." He nodded. "That's not a bad thing." She hesitated. "I don't want this to be temporary." "It doesn't have to be." A week later, she found him waiting outside her office after a board meeting. Everleigh perched on his shoulders like a queen surveying her kingdom. Wren stepped forward, eyebrows lifted. "Is this a surprise ambush?" "Something like that," Zane said, lowering Everleigh gently. "We brought you something." He reached into his coat and pulled out a rolled-up canvas. "She painted it in class." Wren unrolled it, her breath catching. It was a skyline, hers, clearly, with the tall glass towers, but in the foreground was a tiny house with a red roof and 2 stick figures standing in front of it. And beside them, a third one, smaller, holding both their hands. Everleigh beamed. "That's you and Daddy and me." Wren's voice wavered. "It's beautiful." Zane looked at her, his voice steady. "We want to make it real." Her eyes widened slightly. "You mean?" "I'm not good at speeches," he said, "but I know when something's right, and this is right." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Wren blinked. "You're serious?" "I'm not asking for a fairy tale," he said. "Just a life, our life together." She opened the box. The ring inside wasn't flashy, but it was perfect, a simple solitaire, elegant, timeless. Wren didn't hesitate. "Yes." Everleigh clapped, bouncing in place. Zane laughed and lifted her into his arms. They stood there for a moment, the 3 of them, bathed in mid-morning light. Wren reached for Zane's hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You know," she said, "I think this might be the first time I've ever really felt like I have everything." He kissed her knuckles. "That's because you finally do." And she did. Snow fell in soft spirals outside the windows of the Prescott estate, blanketing the Chicago skyline in white. Inside, the warmth of the grand living room glowed from the fireplace, casting flickers of gold across the polished wood floors and high vaulted ceilings. The space had been rearranged not by a designer this time, but by Zane himself. The antique furniture had been moved aside to make room for a patchwork of blankets, pillows, and a miniature tent Everleigh had insisted on building herself. Wren sat cross-legged by the fire, her curls loose for once, draped over her cable-knit sweater. She was barefoot, sipping hot cider with cinnamon, her tablet abandoned on the side table. The board could wait. For the first time in years, it could all wait. Zane stretched out beside her, one arm tucked behind his head, watching Everleigh crawl into the tent with a flashlight and a book about constellations. "She's going to be up all night," he said, his voice low and amused. "She only made it through 2 pages last time," Wren replied. "She'll be out by the 3rd, but let her pretend she's an explorer." He glanced at her, thoughtful. "You let her be whoever she wants to be." "She makes it easy," she said, then turned to him. "So do you." Zane propped himself up on one elbow. "You know, I keep waiting for the floor to fall out from under us." "It won't." "You can't know that." "I couldn't before," she agreed, "but I do now." She set her mug down. "Because I've had everything and still felt like a stranger in my own life. This is the first time it feels like home. He sat up fully, pulling her gently into his lap. She didn't resist, curling into him with a sigh. "What if I wanted to make it official?" he asked. She looked at him. "You mean?" "I mean a date, a real one. No gala, no business angle. Just you, me, maybe a steak, and a bottle of wine can't pronounce." She smiled. "You're asking me out." "I'm asking my fiancé out." She considered him with mock seriousness. "I'll have to check my schedule." "Busy." "Only if you count tomorrow morning's pancake demolition." He kissed her temple. "It's a date then." The following evening, Wren stepped into the restaurant 2 blocks from their building. It wasn't 5-star, didn't have a waiting list or a sommelier, but it had charm brick walls, dim lighting, and a corner booth with a view of the river. Zane stood when she arrived, wearing a dark button-down and that cautious confidence she'd come to love. "You made it," he said. Had to bribe Everly with a second bedtime story, but yes. He pulled out her chair. "Hope you're hungry." She was, for food, for conversation, for the kind of moments that didn't require an audience or a headline. As they ate, they talked about her childhood summers on a vineyard in Northern California she'd never mentioned, and his failed attempt at a food truck business before Everly was born. Neither of them had any walls left, and it showed. "You ever miss it?" she asked, tracing the rim of her wine glass. "The version of your life before everything changed?" "Sometimes," he said, "but not the way you'd think. I miss the simplicity, the quiet, but I wouldn't trade this." She reached across the table, lacing her fingers through his. "Neither would I." He looked at her, eyes serious. "Then let's stop acting like this is temporary." She froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean, let's get married," he said. "Really married, not just rings and promises. I want to do it now. No gala, no press release, just us. You, me, Everly, and the life we've built." Her heart beat against her ribs like a drum. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She didn't hesitate. "Then yes." The next morning, they stood under a canopy of bare trees in Lincoln Park. Snow clung to the branches, the lake beyond frozen in elegant stillness. Wren wore a simple ivory coat over a pale blue sweater dress, her curls swept back with a pearl clip. Zane wore his favorite jacket, the one she'd always secretly liked best. Everly stood between them, holding a tiny bouquet of winter roses and grinning so wide her cheeks ached. They said their vows quietly, the only witnesses a city that had tried to break them both and failed. Afterward, they walked to the little cafe on the corner and celebrated with hot cocoa and croissants. No paparazzi, no press, just warmth, laughter, and a future wide open before them. Later that evening, Wren stood on the rooftop of their new apartment, wrapped in Zane's arms as the snow began to fall again. "Do you still feel like the floor might fall out?" she asked. He looked out over the lights below, then down at her. "Not anymore." She rested her head against his chest. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." "Neither am I." Below them, the city pulsed with life. But up here, in the quiet hush of snowfall and second chances, a carpenter and a billionaire held each other like they'd already built everything they'd ever need. And they had.